react. You whisper in my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, pulling the sound of my name in the crowd. You did a bust. Oh, 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 oh. You did a bust. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home, begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. You're crying age in defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, pulling the sound of my name in the crowd. You did a bust. Oh, 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 oh. You did a bust. Oh, 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 First round, fifth round, final round. Oh, yeah. First round, fifth round, final round. No, 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 no. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You did a bust. Oh, 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 oh. You did a bust. Oh, 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 oh,
Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Sorry Sorry about that. It wouldn't be sound issue. It wouldn't be in time if we didn't have sound issues either. So we wanted to make sure everybody was aware that they were on the right show. The only way to do that is to screw up the sound. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. We were a little pressed for time at the end there and a little late. I do apologize. But we should be good now. I'll check the live chat, make sure everything is going good. We already have a $2 super chat for a Xandering person's gender studies degree. I think in time we'll match all of those super chats. Xandering is with me here, and today we have our guest, Mr. Scott Kelley Ernest. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I hope you guys are doing well too.
I certainly am. Xandering, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's a nice sunny day. Isn't that a song? Bright, sunshiny day.
Yes, it is. And hold on, I'm going to probably be getting an echo there, so let's deal with that echo. And all right, I think we're good. So I thank you again for joining us. Yeah, that's it, a referendum to have fundraising to get Nick's text. Yeah, we have a significant problem with the production machine, and we need a large block of time to fix it. The problem is we haven't had a block of time between Trump, Israel, and it's just been one thing after another. So, but we're going to get this show, and as soon as this show comes down, I'm going to start working on it. I got to tell you, I'm nervous about that because as soon as I do that, that's when Trump's going to say something really stupid. Well, the last time this happened, co-host calls me up and says, I'm sorry, what?
That's my trucking name for my trucking company. Mm-hmm. It's one trucking thing after another.
Well, that's right. And that's not a joke. That's actually the name for his trucking company. So, but I was in bed and co-host calls and says, Nick, I was like, yeah. He's like, we're going to have to do a show. I was like, we just did a show. Trump is, talking about war with Iran. I was like, yeah. And now he's advocating for war crimes on Iran. You think we should do a show on that maybe? Fuck. So, here we are. So, thank you all for joining us. We've been talking a lot, and we've had a number of shows on extremism. We had on Aaron Rabinowitz to talk about ways of combating extremism, ways to deal with it, and also how to not sort of succumb to the fear. We were looking at all of the shootings that were going on at power stations. Like, well, we don't know yet what's causing that. Is there concern for extremists? Of course, absolutely. But we also don't have to see them everywhere, anywhere, and everywhere. We've talked a lot about how to deal with extreme ideologies. There are extreme ideologies on all sides. Greenpeace is on the left and is considered a terrorist organization, and when you look at what they do, it can be quite shocking on some sets of circumstances. So I think it's a worthy discussion, and Scott, I've been following you for a little while, but it wasn't until Sinister pointed it out that you and I should talk. I was like, and you and I actually did. I talked to you like 2 years ago. I think I had invited you onto the show. And,
you did, yeah.
And so when I sent you the invite for this one, I was like, oh yeah, when I said, could you join the show, we are that good. I was booking 2 years out. That's how good we are. So thank you so much for coming. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm 44 years old. I was born in Flint, Michigan, back in 1978. I'm a former extremist. I was a white nationalist for 11 years or so, give and take. I left that life in 2016. Been doing various things since, including founding a nonprofit. But I also received my bachelor's of public health in that time, and I'm about to go back to school for my master's of social work. I basically, that's the gist of it. I usually do really well with questions. I usually have a hard time trying to think of what people would find interesting.
That's my area of expertise. Sit back, relax. We'll ask some interesting questions. I'm sure. And now your degree actually too was in public health, but it was in not epidemiology, but something along those lines. Now I've forgotten what it was.
Uh, Specialty was infection control.
Infection. Yep,
I used to be anti-vax, like a lot of right-wing extremists, and just like a lot of things in my recent life, I've kind of pointed myself in directions completely opposite, just to learn and grow and learn, do new things. And so I figured infection control, is as far from an anti-vaxxer as you can get.
Indeed it is. All right. Well, so you were born in Flint, Michigan. Tell us about that. What was your life growing up? Your family, just let's understand a little bit about your childhood, say to maybe 10, 15 years old.
All right. And for the record, I do tend to ramble a little bit, so sometimes you might have to wrangle me. And
you will fit in
also you might
here.
Occasionally hear a beeping. I did put in some food in the microwave before this. You might occasionally hear some beeping. I apologize for that. I was born in 1978 in Flint, Michigan, and pretty much growing up, it was uneventful. My family, at least me and my parents, we've tended to move around a lot. So, I was raised in Pontiac, Michigan. I've lived in, early life in Nashville, Tennessee, and also Clarksville, Tennessee. Then my dad eventually had moved back to Pontiac, Michigan, and he ended up going into the Air Force. And when he went into the Air Force, we ended up in Dayton for a while at Wright-Patt, and then spent 4 years at Vandenberg in Humboldt, California. And so after he got out of the Air Force, we went to Florida. And unfortunately, Florida is like a black hole. So once you're there, you're pretty much going to go back constantly. And so ever since basically becoming an adult, I even when I can escape, pretty much always go back to Florida. But even since being an adult, I've roamed around. I've lived in the French Quarter of New Orleans on St. Peter Street. I've lived in Orlando, Tampa, Cocoa. I've been in several cities in Montana, Kalispell, Woods Bay, Bozeman. Just a wanderer, and I just keep wandering. And that was kind of my life, my early life into kind of mid adulthood. I was late becoming an extremist. Early on in my life, I was pretty apolitical, but I would have probably been considered more on the liberal side. And then over time, I became more and more libertarian. And then the libertarianism eventually morphed into sort of like a extremist version of it.
All right. So you oh, sorry, were you going to ask a question? Was that right?
No, I'm just concerned because I identify as a libertarian. I don't.
There's nothing really wrong with libertarians. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with libertarians. The problem is a lot of far-right people call themselves libertarians, but I mean, they would be more fascist in actual outlook. So, unfortunately, the term sometimes, gets mangled. Even now, I consider myself a libertarian socialist. So, yeah.
There's definitely a lot of different uses of the terminology. So, and we've ended up getting into that discussion. That's one that happens on President Sundays a lot too. I've hit a lot of libertarians who are the antithesis of everything I've ever understood a libertarian to be. They're like, I'm a libertarian who believes in strong government, telling us, how to. I was like, whoa. And when you get neoliberal into that too, and then there's how the Europeans use it versus Americans. It gets, oh dear Lord. All right, so now
I just had a discussion with that with someone else.
I love those my BAs were in philosophy and psychology, so I get dragged into that rabbit hole pretty easily. So. You also, like, high school and college didn't really seem to be your thing too much either, if I understand correctly.
No, early on, high school, I kind of, I didn't do horrible, but I didn't do well enough that, I wanted to really continue. When we moved to Florida, the school was kind of backwards compared to in California. And I couldn't keep paying attention because I felt like I knew everything already. And considering the books they were using were the same books I had used like 4 years previous, it pretty much was. So I ended up dropping out, got my GED pretty much immediately. I was, among test takers for the GED, I was among the top in Florida. But my early attempts at college were far, far worse. Part of the problem is I am agoraphobic. It really does. It's not always, an issue. And so not everything is a trigger. So I leave for example, I leave the house quite often when I'm in Montana. I have no issues. But Florida is kind of a different story. It's too hot, humid. I'm not a big fan of the people. I'm not a big fan of the traffic. I'm not a big fan of the pretty much anything about the state. And considering I do have all kinds of anxiety issues and stuff like that, eventually it just gets to the point where it becomes overwhelming, and I tend to then stay kind of cooped up. And my first attempts at college pretty much ended that way. I would be okay for a while, and then over and over again, my anxiety would just start going through the roof, and then I would just stop going. And so my first attempts at college just were not good. I had a C average, but just not enough. But that was also when I was young, and that was in the pre-white nationalist time too.
Let's not. When I ask this next question, nobody please notify 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿Toy. Let's stay out of this one. I was in a stream once with 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿Toy, and someone was like, "Let's talk about Odinism." And I was like, "Oh, y'all only have to say that twice, and he's in the stream." So let's talk about Odinism. I've said it once. We're not going to say it a second. Actually, I think I said it twice technically. Hopefully it's 3 times. And by the way, this is as actually a fan of Oceans, but anyways. All right. So you got into Odinism. How did that happen?
I got in really young. I converted when I was about 13 years old. My family was Methodist, but not really church going or anything like that. So there, not really any religion, but I did flirt with various Christian religions when I was younger. I had friends that would go to church and, various churches. But unfortunately, a lot of my friends did tend to get, not family friendly to talk about. All I can say is
we basically. Let me cut you off. We haven't had this discussion, but people always ask if you can use swear words, use the word fuck, use the word libertarian, other swear words in this discussion, and you absolutely can. This is an adult show,
or like 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿Toy.
Or is that 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿Toy? This is an adult show. We cover adult topics, and this is going to be an adult topic. So, we're assuming it's going to be demonetized. More than 50% of our shows are demonetized. We are much more interested in hearing the truth. And when we do some of our Russia shows, especially when we're doing footage covering actual acts of genocide, it can get pretty brutal. My suspicion is you're not going to compete with that. So if it's, feel free to express yourself however you feel you need to.
Sounds like a plan. Basically, they got molested. So I kind of looked at Christianity overall immediately as, no, I don't think that's for me. And so I started looking around really young. And, it took me a while to kind of, understand things and, consider myself an Odinist and everything. But I learned for a while. And, eventually it just became, a part of me. I'm not necessarily the most, the most religious Odinist out there, so I tend to take a little bit more secular view of things. I kind of I'm an Odinist, but I also, don't necessarily quote unquote worship like constantly. I mean, there's no real worship in Odinism anyways. I tend to, I'm not very, I'm not very religious. Let me put it that way.
All right. Now, at some point you ended up becoming, you must have already been aware that there were white nationalists and, different kinds of extremist groups. What were your thoughts on those extremist groups? And then how did you first encounter white nationalism in any meaningful way?
Well, early on, I didn't really have much of an opinion. I'd encountered racism before and stuff like that, but it never really, I'm white, so it's not like it was against me or anything. So early on, I didn't really think much of it either way, which, is a horrible way to live itself. But when I was younger, I definitely wasn't racist. But I also didn't really care about racism either. So I would occasionally, the internet was early when I was younger. So, there was a lot less. I mean, there was a lot of racism and stuff online, but there was a lot less like places to go to see it and stuff like that. So I had occasionally, on Yahoo, search engine, occasionally seen things by, Stormfront, just searching around for Odinist stuff or, pretty much any subject you could occasionally get a page. And my first thoughts of it were, this is kind of dumb. And, I tended to not form too many positive opinions of most Stormfronters early on. My first real kind of introduction to it it's basically what was my recruitment arc, was one day I was kind of surfing the net and just offhand I kind of ran across this blog by a self-proclaimed antifa named _𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐷, who his blog kind of it was stalking the girls from Prussian Blue, which was a white nationalist band. They were 12-year-old girls. They were doing it early before, it's not like it was really their choice in the matter. So
if you're 12 years old, your number one goal is to impress mom and dad. And if mom and dad say, well, just so you know, we're a member of a master race and you can really impress us by helping the white pride, that's extraordinarily difficult and tragic to deal with and cope with. So, but I think that's what you're saying, and that makes sense. So, but is that roughly
pretty much it? Yeah. I would never have ever really considered the girls themselves white nationalists because they were 12. They were, there's no political opinion really that they would have really had. So, that doesn't mean they didn't say racist things or do racist things, but they were following what their mom wanted. So I saw this blog, and I noticed at one point on the blog that there was a post where _𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐷 was trying to get people to go to their house and rape them, including posting a picture of the map to their house. Jesus. And that I thought was completely unacceptable.
Now this was
were you going to ask the question?
Only if you were done. Like I said, I'm actually a fan of rambling. I do it much myself, and I can always appreciate a good ramble. Not that you were there yet, but
well, if you have a question, I can answer it first.
Well, I wanted to make sure too. So now this was somebody, and I noticed who you said self-identified as Antifa, and so I did want to get into that for a second, but I want to make sure that you've finished sort of your line of. I also tend to ask compound questions. Don't expect one question at a time. I'm going to ask you 2, 3, or 4, and so far you're keeping up with them, which is good. better not be the case you can keep up with too many, because then I take it as a challenge, and then if you're keeping up with it, the live chat will be, wait, are we on question A, subparagraph 1, chapter 6 of, so I can get a little, but finish that, and then we'll get on to the Antifa, because I think that's worth getting into, but please continue.
Okay. I basically, I thought that was just kind of horrible to do. Again, these are 12-year-old girls, regardless of their beliefs, and stuff, which they were raised with, you don't try to get them raped. And so I did contact the authorities. They kind of took basically a report, but otherwise kind of shrugged it off. And really, they just mainly wanted me to, they did say, did you let their mom know or let their parents know? So I kind of took that as them saying, well, go ahead and let the parents know. So I contacted April, who is their mother, April Gatey, and she's very well known. But I contacted her on they had like a little kind of guest book forum. And, I started basically talking to her. I let her know the situation. She told me about how that guy was stalking them and stuff like that. And while initially I didn't really get the racism thing and stuff like that, and April was really nice to me, and she was actually very friendly. And to be fair, she actually is still very friendly whenever we talk. She's she obviously these days we disagree on a lot, but the last time I talked to her, she was really nice to me, and she even at some point wants to meet for dinner at some point. But anyway, that's an aside. So I ended up basically joining this forum basically they wanted to make me a moderator. The only job I kind of had was to make sure people weren't going on there to post porn, because it's a site for little girls. So I ended up becoming the moderator, and then they created another forum that looked a lot more like Stormfront. It was a V bulletin, and I became a moderator there. Then she added me as a admin to their blog, and it kind of started just escalating from there. She asked me if I was interested in going to Stormfront and actually joining and meeting people. And I think one of the first things I told her was it kind of looked lame, but I did. And kind of resisted the white nationalist label for a while, but just over time, if you're kind of doing this, and especially if you do have things about you that are that people that can recruit can use to kind of grab you, like Odinism, it is very easy to then start falling down the rabbit hole. So that's the kind of the basics of how I kind of started meeting white nationalists.
All right. We had a comment that I'd like to just quickly from Jacob Taylor. This is harder to listen to than I was expecting. Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing, Scott. Thank you very much. And we do genuinely appreciate you being here. And Scott had said on DMs when Scott had said on DMs when we were preparing this that he would answer any question and to just really have at it, which we appreciate that level of honesty. It is my intention to be as honest as possible and to get into this as much as we can, obviously. And we've already started. Yay, if you find this triggering, your mental health is most important. So I would ask everybody to monitor yourselves, and we can have this discussion. I don't know if you use Discord. We'll talk about that at some point. But we can find ways we may have this discussion again. We may bring them back. We may try a lighter set of version of events. But your own mental health is most important. But thank you very much. And I concur. Thank you, Scott, very much for coming.
Thank you.
So
you wanted to know about Yama.
Well, what I wanted to know real quick was you said so-called Antifa, and I wanted to I wanted you to expand a bit on why you said that.
So Yama considers herself Antifa, but and and he wasn't white. He was Asian. I'm not sure what ethnicity exactly, but he tended to himself be pretty racist, misogynistic. He was very abusive towards pretty much anybody that's ever dealt with him. And the reason why I know a lot of this stuff is because he started posting on a site called Moot Stormfront, and I actually joined Moot Stormfront before I did Stormfront. It was a kind of mocking site founded by Antifa, and it was considered kind of a debate site. So Stormfront debating is usually done in their open forums where anybody can post. You don't have to be a white nationalist to post there, and so there's lots of debates, fights, flame wars, you name it. But they only allow people that are not white nationalists to post in open forums. Moot Stormfront, however, kind of was like an expansion of the open forums, but run by Antifa. And so I joined on there, and I had friendly debates with a lot of Antifa on there. 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐼, who is pretty famous founder of One People's Project. I've known him probably longer than, I've known him basically since the beginning. And so I've had several debates with him. I've had even a couple of little spats with him. We've also at several points said, we really need to get together and have a beer. And this is back when I was a white nationalist. So Moot Stormfront was very interesting, but 𝐓𝐢𝐜𝐻𝐿𝐼 was a member, and he was alienating everybody on the site. And eventually he got off the site, and he called himself, back then it was, they always called themselves anti-racist instead of anti-fascist, but I don't think he was ever part of any actual group or associated with any, Antifa movements or anything like that.
At the time, did you associate? I guess the reason I'm asking is because I'm trying to figure out if that sort of colored your view of if this is the guy, if he's like, I'm Antifa and he's going out doing these things, I would imagine that would poison the well in regards to how you view either Antifa or any perceived Antifa, or eventually probably anyone perceived to be on the left, I would imagine. So I guess that's where I was asking if that had an impact or not. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out where your head was at.
It didn't actually have that much of an impact. I've always been the type of person that if you actually are decent to me, I'm going to be decent back, and that whether they're Antifa or not. So there's Antifa that I had knocked down, dragged down fights with. There's Antifa that, like 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐿𝐼, I would have had a beer with. And depending on what kind of period of white nationalism I was in, I had kind of a different response. Early on, I was definitely more Antifa friendly. When I became a Stormfront moderator, I became a little bit less Antifa friendly, but I still had those that I was very friendly with. And then it was kind of right after I believe it was Anders Breivik's, the incident with Anders Breivik, that because my like of white nationalists started going away, I started basically despising white nationalists. And it's also the same period when I was recruiting for White Pioneer Little Europe Kalispell here in Montana. Every time I would meet a white nationalist, they would disappoint me. They would kind of seem disturbing to me. My job was to vet them, so I would ask them questions, and most of my questions were about violence and whether they would use it or whether they approved of it. For example, I would ask if they approved of Anders Breivik, and 90% of the time they would.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut you off because I do want to get to this. But I like I said, I want to try to sort of go do a more linear kind of arc. So you at some point
I told you you'd have to ring me.
and you were very good about it, so I appreciate that. So if in this arc here, you had warned this girl. She was in a white nationalist band. She asked you if you wanted to come on to Stormfront. You thought it was kind of lame, but you did. And so how did that, obviously, at the time, there was something you found appealing about it, or what was it that was so appealing?
You kind of find a community. I mean, it's a horrible community. It's a community. It's dysfunctional, doesn't get along, but it's community. And once you meet that community, you start kind of your ideology kind of starts merging with the community. Now, I never really became a true believer in a lot of things, and there were a lot of things I did disagree with. But I tended to use me being more moderate than many of them to the advantage of white nationalists. So I was very good at kind of playing the straight man in that, if you meet your average white nationalist, you're probably not going to get along with them. But when you met somebody like me that could say the right things and do the right things, and actually, I've always been really good at manipulation. There's a reason why I was a recruiter. It becomes a lot harder to oppose. Will Randall here in Montana was one of the people from Love Lives here in the Flathead, and one time he told me that I was the single worst white nationalist he ever went up against because he couldn't ever prove I was actually racist. Basically, the only thing that told anybody that was the fact that I did. So, that's kind of where my arc went.
And you said that made you a good recruiter. So I assume, and you'd said that you were manipulative. I assume then that both this was in fact that you were deliberately being manipulative to try to get people to sort of come in, and that this was also recognized by those around you who said, hey, let's put you up at the front because you can hold our values and yet not show it. Is that roughly what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm a fat guy that can sometimes look like a homeless mountain man, but despite that, I've always been really good at, I don't know, I guess I'm somewhat charismatic at times. I may not be able to speak very well, especially publicly. I'm not a public speaker, but I can play the normal person. And so I use that to my advantage. If I went to a place, if me and April went out, she would draw way more angry people than I would, and I could usually derail any anger. So that's just the kind of way I operated. And so I ended up becoming a Stormfront moderator and became a recruiter at Pioneer Europe Kalispell at the same time. So
you described once being in a D&D group, and where you would deliberately, actually be recruiting the people, if I understand correctly, but do so very quietly and very subtly, and not just dive into your beliefs. Is that part of it? Is there anything you can sort of expand on that on?
So you basically you're basically in the group, and you just start talking about various things. It can be anything from, let's say it's a group here in Montana. You might start talking about going skiing, or you might talk about going hiking, And then you might start broaching more political subjects. What are your thoughts of this, and what are your thoughts of that? And then you start, choosing kind of topics that kind of people might disagree with you on, but as long as you know how to put it out there in a sort of neutral or just kind of an easy way for them to understand, even if it's kind of one of the worst kind of topics you can bring up. If you know how to do it right, you can get people nodding along and say, that makes sense. And so, yeah, I could generally recruit people from no matter who they were, their politics, just by being nice and being, even eccentric. I am eccentric. I've always been eccentric. I've always played it up, and I use that to my advantage.
And real quick, I missed a super chat, $2 super chat from the Sinister Porpoise. And 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿 is still here, but I know 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿 is gonna have to go. And 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿, if you have any questions, you can just hit me up and let me know real quick, or you can keep listening, whatever. He's got limited time though, so. But I'm gonna wanna. Can I mute the internals for 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿 on this one? Okay. Libertarian noun. Someone slightly left of Mussolini. Ouch. Thank you, Sinister. Thank you, Sinister,
That's a good
for the super chat and for the support. I'm gonna yes. Right. You said at one point, you tweeted actually at one point, my job was to normalize hate, and I was good at it.
Yes, and obviously I've not shy about having a fairly large ego too. I'm just short of narcissist, basically. So yeah.
Well, and well, no, okay, I'm going to save that question for later. So I'm made of questions, as a friend of mine would say, and so I want to ask you a whole bunch of questions about how and why you left and all, and we're not there yet. So I'm going to try to stick, because this does go down a rabbit hole very quickly. I do want to say something. Oh God. Okay. Let me ask this question first. What would you look for in people that you were recruiting? What would you look at and say, ooh, there's someone I should spend some time on?
Is there any sort of connection or similarity to me? Do we have the same interests? Do we have, I had a lot of, leftist kind of beliefs, even at my worst. I've always been, pro Medicare for all, basically a lot of things like that. And I could use that as a kind of jumping off point to talk to people that might otherwise be ideologically opposed to me. And that's kind of just how I was. If we kind of had some of these similarities, I would just stick the wedge in there and just kind of yank it.
Were you looking for like critical thinkers or people who had a specific kind of education, people who broken homes? Was there anything along those lines that you found helped?
When I was recruiting, I tended to look for kind of family people as well as people that wanted to have fun. I wasn't exactly when I joined the PLE, for example. The Kalispell PLE was started by April, and it was originally very kind of Nazi. Basically, they had parades, and they would show Hitler movies in the theater, in the basement of the library and stuff like that. When I joined, I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more of a white nationalist community that's an actual community. So I kind of pushed things like going out hiking, going to festivals together as a group, going out to eat as a group, having barbecues, stuff like that. And so I didn't really look for kind of thinkers or anything. I was looking for people of any sort that were wanting to be in an actual community, and those that weren't dangerous. Because if I saw anybody as kind of a danger to the community, whether they're going to do something to the surrounding community which could harm us, or whether, to be fair, I didn't trust a lot of them. So, there were a lot that I rejected because I felt they were an actual physical danger to us. And so that's kind of how I would recruit. And so I would meet people constantly. There would be people on Stormfront that would be like, we're coming into town. We want to meet up. And I'd say, hey, why don't we meet at this restaurant, or we can meet somewhere else. And we would meet up, talk. I'd ask questions. Sometimes a person might end up staying and moving there, and sometimes just, please go and don't come back.
I want to get into that one as well, because I as I recall, there's a story there. I did want to ask, cults have a number of techniques that they use to inculcate people into the cult. One of them is love bombing, where they really sort of feed your ego, and they say, this is why you're important to us, this is why we are a family, and this is what you bring. And you had said that, you had a healthy ego. Do you think that ego played into it at all, and perhaps the feeling like you were of value to them? And if so, how, as a recruiter, do you look back on your own entering and see how maybe people were recruiting you and trying to get you deeper into the organization?
Yeah, I absolutely believe my tendency to have a huge ego played a part in all of it. Not to mention the whole, although I never considered myself a white supremacist or anything like that, functionally I was, so I was a white supremacist. Ego plays a part in that. Anybody that's a far right extremist, that, most have egos. I mean, that's the whole kind of, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene today, with her getting chased off and everything, but she went there because she has an ego. That's definitely a thing. And in this particular case, my ego is definitely there, but I also did at least have a conscience. And so we're not at the point yet where I'm leaving, but basically the reason I left eventually was because of my conscience. So I definitely would also flatter people. So if I was looking to bring somebody there, I would definitely flatter them. And even if I didn't necessarily, as long as they were decent enough people, they would have been okay for the kind of group. It wasn't an actual group, but it was a community. Even if I didn't necessarily like the person as an actual person, I could usually flatter them and come in and stuff like that. I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, though.
I think so, and any elements you didn't, I can bring up again in a minute. So you must have early on seen when you joined Stormfront, and as you were getting more power there, more moderation powers, you must have seen calls to violence reasonably early on. What were your thoughts on that, and what were your thoughts on the more extremist members?
Especially my early part of it, yes, I would see violent things start happening. 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻𝐿𝐷 was a Stormfront. I don't remember if he was a mod or if he was just a member, but fairly early on, he murdered. I don't remember I think it was his wife. I don't remember who he murdered. So there was murders and stuff that I had seen, and not seen, but knew about, and then there was actual violence that I had seen and stuff like that. But the way I would kind of justify it, or not necessarily justify it, but kind of deflect, was, they're not a part of my community. So despite the fact that we're pushing the same things overall, despite the fact that we're saying the same things, I would basically say, he's not a part of my community, so he has nothing to do with me. And that was just completely incorrect. But I didn't know it at the time. I started buying into it. One thing about having an ego sometimes also means that you can also be fairly gullible. And I definitely proved that. And so over the years, I would see more and more violence, and it just started becoming hard to kind of separate yourself from the people doing the really bad things. I mean, I can't say I did good things, but I did nothing criminal, and that's at least something I can say. But over the years, I started connecting with more and more white nationalists, especially when I became a moderator on Stormfront, and especially when I became a recruiter. I at one point ended up a Facebook friend of Anders Breivik. I knew him as Andrew Berwick. I didn't know at the time who he was. I don't remember why I actually had basically disconnected away from him. I don't remember if he said something stupid or dangerous, or if maybe he even just replied to my Facebook, because I did try to keep my Facebook fairly political free. But I was a Facebook friend of his. And then, of course, when Anders Breivik murdered all those children in Norway, I took that personally. And so even though I didn't leave white nationalism at the time, I kind of flipped out, and I was a mod at the time, but even I got banned because I kept going into threads and yelling at people for supporting his murders. And so, yeah, I think I answered your question, but then I started rambling again. Sorry.
What was the general mood when he went on his rampage, killing mostly children at a summer camp in Norway, if I recall? What was the mood in general there? I mean, supportive in general on average? Was it the time is now, we should all? I mean, what was the general thinking on Stormfront?
In general, on Stormfront, it was supportive. The moderators basically created a rule, and now I couldn't remove posts in most forums. In fact, I couldn't ban anybody. I was a facilitator. That's the type of moderator I was. My job was to create discussion. So I usually posted things in news links, and I would usually, I did run the secession forum though, so I could do things in that. And there's a story behind that too, if you're ever interested. But when it came to Anders Breivik, I had no power to do anything other than yell at people. So I would go into the threads, and I would reply to people that were being supportive of it, and I would basically just start ranting. Eventually, Jack Boot, who was the editor-in-chief of Stormfront, one of the admins, ended up banning me because, and what the ban message basically said was, we're trying to delete all of the supportive comments, and you're just bringing attention to it. It's like, yeah, of course I am. And I sent him a message saying we should be banning the people making the supportive messages, not just deleting their posts. If we're just deleting their posts, then we're keeping people that are supporting the murder of children. And back then, I would even use the terms, he murdered white children. For white nationalists, allegedly white children's, what all they're, interested in and caring about. Yet when somebody murders them, they're okay with that. And they would use, excuses, they're commies and stuff like that. you mentioned the story about when I would recruit. I would use Anders Breivik as one of the questions when recruiting. I'd ask, do you support what Anders Breivik did? Most of the time they were supportive, and most of the time those were people that wanted nothing to do with. I want one person. I even asked him, "What would you do if the child of a member of the PLE kind of went commie to get back at mom and dad?" And he basically said, "Well, if they don't do anything, I will." What does that mean? Are you gonna harm the kid? Are you gonna harm the parents? I mean, what are you gonna do? So that when you start meeting people and you start learning kind of that all of these people are supporting things like this, it's no wonder I kind of ended up going the direction I went. So.
So most people at this point would say, and I'd like to keep in mind, all of us have made mistakes and done stupid things, and all of us are like, well, if that building were on fire, I'd run in and all that other stuff. But, I have to believe everybody listening right now saying they're going like, I'd have left by now, and I have to believe probably most of them would. To those who are saying I'd have been gone at this point, this would have crossed so many lines, especially, whereas I think you made a good point, which was he was killing white children. So it's sort of like, and for what was described by you and what I think most of us who've looked at it, there is this, it's almost, the mafia is an interesting organization. I think one of the reasons people sort of find it fascinating is at least the way it's sort of portrayed and the way we view it is as this weird both family and business at the same time, where some things are sacrosanct, but human life apparently is not. It's an interesting, so you're taking a look at white nationalists who, you're not the first one to tell me this, they actually really care about, we're about building families, and, the hetero, cis male, and the wife who's, really, she knows how to keep a house and do all these other things, but in the bedroom, man, and then, and they've got kids and all, but that's it. That's the image, but making sure it's all white and it's going to be in some, secluded area in either Montana or whatever. Here's a guy apparently violating it. Mm-hmm. You've talked about all this other stuff, and we're going to get into a bit more. Everybody listening to this right now is saying, I'd have been gone. I'd have been gone. If I could understand staying up to it till now, I'd have been gone here. Why were you not?
Bad choices. Kind of brainwashed. I had my community. I had friends. None of those are good reasons, but they're reasons. They're just really piss poor reasons, basically. I did. I basically, I was basically a hypocrite. So,
now, if I recall, the young girl who helped you get into this, her name was Anna. I'm terrible with names, so I'm 90% sure it was Anna. And that kind of relationship, you were how much older than her at the time? I can't do the math. Reasonably older than her. Is that something? That's something that most of us think, okay, as a parent, I would have a hard time with that kind of relationship. How was that viewed as odd, strange? Was that viewed as inappropriate, either by her parents, by anybody in the white nationalist movement? And was there anybody, well, let me start with that question. So, I would, yeah. Please.
Anna? I'm trying to think, are you talking about one of my exes?
No, I'm sorry. The young girl who, and I may have conflated elements of the story, so if I did, I apologize. The young girl who was in a band, she was, I think, 12 years old, and I believe she was she not the one that...
Oh, Lynx and Lamb?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Lynx and Lamb?
Yes.
April's twins?
April, I said, April's twins. So, okay, and then I think what I did was I conflated, so you became friends with their mom, was that correct? I'm sorry, I may have...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I became friends with April, and yeah, April's older than me. So.
Okay. My bad. Well, I'm glad I asked that question and cleared that up. I got the timeline wrong, and so
Okay.
apologies there. Good. So,
yeah, she's older than me, and she was married. So yeah.
So you've now got this situation where you're seeing what appears to be some hypocrisy there. Calls to violence. Were there any other calls to violence that you had seen in general? And we're going to lead up to Charlottesville in a minute, but anything else that you saw that you found disturbing, threats, anything like that? And what was your view of them?
I mean, JT Reddy was a Stormfront member and NSM member that killed his his girlfriend and her kids. There was Wade Michael Page who murdered the 6th in Wisconsin. There was, violence after violence after violence after violence, and every single time I would go, it's the toxoids. It's those that are toxic. It's the ones over there, not me. I'm not a part of that. The PLE is not a part of that. That's how I would justify it. What I'm doing is better than what they're doing, and part of that's my ego. It didn't really come to a head for me until one day I basically at this point stopped vetting for the PLE, and April sends me a message. Some guy from Grand Rapids had moved to the area. His name was David Lenio. And David, son of one of the top lawyers in Grand Rapids, apparently viewed himself as, poor and one of the working class. And so all he did, he worked in kitchens and stuff like that, but he also skied every day, which you have to have money to do that. So I think part of the reason he did the kitchens and stuff is because he just couldn't hold a job. He would probably get money from dad, but he couldn't actually hold a job of his own. But one day I noticed in the news, because of course nobody bothered telling. Oh, well, first before that point, April asked me if I wanted to meet him, and so I told her no, I'm not interested. She's like, he sounds like a pretty nice guy. He skis every day. I don't care. At that point, I was just like, I don't want to meet him. And it is what it is. He was in the area, but the next thing I know was he was being arrested. Why? Because he threatened to shoot local school kids as well as the kids of people online, including Jonathan Hudson, who was at the time the communication director for the Brady campaign against gun violence. And I flipped, because it's easy to deflect and say that's not my community when it's not in your community. So I kind of I flipped out. Pure and simple. I started basically telling April, and at the time I lived with white nationalists, because I was the renter, and then I would sub-rent rooms, and so I had a lot of white nationalists I lived with, and even to this day I trust some of them, but I basically told him I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. It's over. I can't justify the violence. I can't justify this ideology. This ideology is bunk. I was telling them basically straight to them. And I started going on Stormfront and ranting about it publicly, very publicly. And even Jonathan Hudson noticed, and he sent me a message basically saying he wanted to meet. He was warned away by his wife about meeting me because, as she put it, he has guns, right? but he kind of trusted me enough to say, yeah, but I don't think he's going to do anything because he does seem really upset. And so I met him, and that was basically the final stretch of my time in the movement. I did stay on Stormfront for a little while longer after that, but I was pretty much not a white nationalist at that point. And most of what I did on Stormfront at that point, I started trolling and I started kind of causing a little bit of chaos. So.
And so you were almost building kind of a commune, if I understand correctly. And some of them, the ones who couldn't afford it, you were actually letting live rent free. Is that right?
I can kind of explain what a PLE is, in that. So a commune is its own thing, just like a compound is its own thing. A PLE is a target area. It's not a group. It's not anything like that. It's literally the PLE was Kalispell, or Northwest Montana in general. So in the concept of a PLE is to have people of your ideology move into the area, and they might live with you. They might live their own place. They might associate with you. They might not associate with you. They might not even like you. And a lot of local people, local white nationalists never liked me. So there's various reasons why I was very divisive in the movement. So the PLE is really just, you're trying to bring people in to kind of start voting as a block and kind of push the local politics in your direction. That's kind of what a PLE is. And then the PLE itself starts having, various communities that might interact and might not interact. The ones that lived with me were kind of my, community. And that was a part of April's community. April also interacted with a lot more people outside of that particular circle than I did, because I did, despite my being a recruiter and everything, I did tend to be pretty insular. If I didn't like white nationalists, I wouldn't have anything to do with them. So there were people in the Kalispell area like Carl Garst that I would have nothing to do with, or Northwest Front members. Nothing. I want nothing to do with them at the time. So that's kind of how a PLE is. It's not really a group, a single group. It's more of just a target location.
So let me ask you a question, and it's slightly out of order, but since it's come up. You had said that some of them were good. You had thought then were good guys, and you still now think are good guys. White nationalism at this point, when you're talking about it, you had thought that these extremists were that there were extremists in the group, and that they were the problems. They were the ones who were causing it. And then you seem to get a sense of, no, it was the ideology and the group. I'm curious, do you think that you can separate that ideology from a person?
It's less of me thinking that they're good people, even now. It's more of, I trust them, at least when it comes to me. So I use April as an example. April, I trust her. I'm sure by now she knows I've come out as LGBT. She knows that I am anti-fascist. She knows that I run an organization that does exit counseling. But she, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to say, say what she would say behind my back. But, whenever we talk, she's really nice. She has congratulated me on a lot of my success, and stuff like that. And for at least in April's case, I do trust her. Now, do I necessarily believe she's entirely changed? No. Do I believe she's evolved on a few subjects? I do. Would I ever call her a former? Probably not. And by former, I mean former white nationalist. No, I really wouldn't. But there's others out there that I know have left. There are those that. One example was Mark. Mark was one of those that I brought into my house. He was kind of he was kind of weird in that he was one part cowboy, one part Tom Selleck. So he was a very unique individual. He used to be a ranch hand down in Colorado. He ended up the owner sold the place, so he needed a place to stay. I told him, mutual asked if I could help him, so I told him, get a bus ride up here, and I'll put you up for a while. And he ended up basically being a roommate for almost the entire time. And we actually have had a physical fight, so we had an interesting relationship. But even after I left the movement and was getting out and everything like that, he helped me move. So he helped me drive my camper down to Bozeman for school, and he actually took care of the storage unit that we had stuff in and stuff like that. And at one point, I had let another former roommate, Stan, borrow my van, and at one point he kept his cats in the van all summer. He would bring out food and water, but it would get bad and the water would get cold or get hot. And he actually called me at one point because we needed to get the cops to go look at it and take care of it and stuff like that. So, even after I left the movement, he had my back. So would I consider him necessarily a good guy? No, but I trust him, and that's kind of how it is.
No, I'm sorry, I cut you off, please.
Oh no, you're good. Go ahead.
We have a little bit of a lag, so I feel like I'm speaking with Russia. I always love, especially when people first started, when they had to start, they were sending correspondence either to wherever it was, and there was a lag, and it was before the anchors had sort of figured out how to work with it, and everybody's just... So, out of curiosity, there has to be, I assume, a line that you could cross in terms of being vocal against Stormfront and against white nationalists. There has to be a line somewhere that you could cross where that you could no longer rely on that trust, whether you were aware of that or not. Do you think there is such a line, and does that concern you at all?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, if you decided that you wanted to be the national spokesman for why white supremacists are all terrible, horrible people, and you decided to run for president on that platform, I assume that your relationship with most of these people would take a significant hit, and in fact, probably it would not be one where you guys could talk anymore. So now you're obviously not planning on doing that, but well, let's just okay. So let's take the most extreme example where you are advocating for white supremacy to be outlawed in the U.S. You're advocating for none of which you're doing. So let's not get this clipped out of context or anything. But that is a far hypothetical extreme where I have to believe any former acquaintances would disavow you and yada yada yada. Versus sort of well, I'm just going to live my life, you live yours. You're somewhere in the middle there, but I assume the further you got to that, the further you speak out about the organization, the more that you do that's critical of Stormfront and of white nationalists, and the more that you say that's even mildly critical, I have to believe at some point, you don't have to go all the way that far, but some point between where you are today and, just being like, I'm going to donate all my money to somewhere in between there has to be a time where you're going to cross a line that means that they don't trust you anymore and that they don't have your back and they may or may not tell you. Is that something that you've considered?
Not really. And if they did turn their backs on me, I really wouldn't care. So, my goal, one of my goals now is to try to get people out. And so one of the reasons why I do keep in contact with some people, especially from the PLE, is because, I would love to help April change completely. I would love to, I would love to see her, make amends to people that she's harmed and stuff like that. Stuff like that. So, and I don't hate April. I care about her kids. Both the twins, they're obviously older now, and they've even got kids of their own, twins of their own, in fact.
Oh my God.
And then, of course, what was that?
No, sorry, that was just, oh my God. They've got twins of their own. Yes, so it's just, okay.
Yeah. And then Dresden's a doll. She's always been awesome. And Dresden was never, ever even in a band or anything. She was never involved at all. So she pretty much, that's one thing I'll give April credit for, is especially when the twins wanted to go off and do their own thing, April let them. And then Dresden, April didn't even bother pushing her in any particular direction. So, I'll give April some credit for that. And some of the other ones that were in the PLE, the problem with especially the people in the PLE turning on me is because a lot of them, relied on me and knew my quirks and stuff like that. They knew that I had, there were things about me that were definitely very un-white nationalist. I was a kinkster. I was a part of the fetish community. I dated a lot of liberal women and, stuff like that. So, and of course I'm sex positive and stuff like that. So they, some of these quirks were, badly kept secrets, basically. And so, especially the people that knew the least white nationalist things about me, I highly doubt most of them would turn on me too much. That being said, Stormfront has absolutely turned on me. They refuse to talk about me anymore. They're basically pretending I don't exist at this point. There are a lot of people I considered friends way back then that I burned bridges with. I burned bridges with pretty much every white nationalist. I think the only two that I have actually even talked to in the last 4 years are April and Kent. Kent was another one that lived in my house. And even that was just to, because I'd give him control of the PLE Facebook page. And the last time I talked to him was just to get him to take it down, because the Montana Human Rights Network asked me to. So, I don't have a whole lot of contact with them, but I have a feeling that most of those that were in the PLE probably wouldn't turn on me too much. So,
we've had a couple of requests. Could you define PLE for us, please?
Pioneer Little Europe. Like I said, it's a target area. So there was Pioneer Little Europe, Kalispell. There was one in Maine for a while, southern Maine, and I think that's been tried a couple times. There was East Tennessee for a while. There was Sevierville, Tennessee for a while. Harrison, Arkansas is basically a PLE. There's been a few tries in Australia. There was also one in the La Crescenta Valley in California, short-lived. So again, basically, it's you put a target on an area and you try to get people to go there to influence the politics.
So at some point now, you've had Andrew Breivik. You have been reprimanded for calling attention to the calls for violence by saying it should stop as opposed to just sweeping it under the rug. And you've seen constant calls to violence on Stormfront. At some point, something was the straw that broke the camel's back. What was that?
That was David Lenio. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't ignore threats against children. You know, considering threats against children was what got me involved in the first place. I couldn't ignore that, and I especially couldn't ignore it when it's just random. I mean, I wouldn't have supported it even if it was targeted. There was Craig Cobb is a Canadian white nationalist that he tried to do 𝐒𝐤𝐜𝐴𝐻, North Dakota PLE, where he bought up a bunch of land and he started giving it out to white nationalists to try to get them to move there and take over. He ended up going to jail for a while for menacing with firearms and stuff like that. But you know, his community attracted attention from a guy named Danny McMahon. Danny was known as Jack Corbin on Gab, but he became Jack Corbin later. At the time, he went by a whole bunch of different usernames on Facebook, and he was one of the cheerleaders for Craig Cobb. Well, he would make very public comments about going to North Dakota and basically raping the children, especially girls, of Antifa that opposed Craig. So, you know, just as a lot of the violence that white nationalists do is towards children or women. Danny McMahon was also kind of one of the last straws. That he was just before David Lenio, and between those two, I just couldn't take it anymore. So I started telling the PLE, no, I can't do this anymore. And would go on Stormfront and I would start arguing with people. You know, I would start going into posts and make posts that would just completely make fools of whoever posted it. There was one time they made a thread about there was a Jewish woman that was a cover athlete on Sports Illustrated, and they would go in there and they would badmouth her and everything like that, and I went in there and defended her. There were other things I would do. I started talking about the fact that I'm polyamorous very publicly on Stormfront, and of course, you know, considering white nationalists, just like most on the right, do tend to be a little bit squeamish when it comes to sex. There was a little bit of backlash for that, and eventually they banned me. And especially once I was banned, and once I moved from Kalispell to Bozeman to go to Montana State University, that was it. I was done. I was out of movement completely by July 2016. I started reaching out to Love Lives Here in the Flathead and the Montana Human Rights Network, and I started basically trying to do what I could to make amends. And that includes Christian Picciolini is a former that founded Life After Hate and Free Radicals Project. I connected with him at one point, kind of apologizing to him for ever bad-mouthing him. And because I was in connection with him, as well as Will from Love Lives Here, this was also right around the time of the Whitefish Troll Storm. The Whitefish Troll Storm was when Richard Spencer and his mother started attacking the Gersh family and Whitefish, Tanya Gersh and her husband and her 12-year-old son, which was another thing that set me off. And so when that happened, the backlash caused a lot of people to donate to the Montana Human Rights Network. And so back with the troll storm, I tried to get the page attacking the 12-year-old son taken down. Because again, my focus was on the kid. I felt that Tanya and her husband they were adults. They could deal with what they're going to get. You know, I was ideologically still fairly white nationalist then. Over time, I would have probably tried to defend Tanya a lot more and stuff like that. But at the time, I was just out of the movement. I just wanted to live quietly. I wasn't really even planning on necessarily changing. So I objected to attacking the kids, so I tried to have it taken down. Well, Cloudflare, who I complained to, decided to send my personal information to Andrew, who immediately called me crying because of me trying to take it down. You're going to get my billions and billions of fans. I'm going to get my billions of fans after you and your family, and you're going to pay. I mean, I got about 15 weird phone calls and roughly about the same amount of weird emails. But I mean, basically, I got doxxed in the middle of the troll storm myself because of it. A lot of people did not want to attack me because of my history in a white nationalist. So that's one of the reasons why Andrew kind of failed. But what it did do was it did get Will took notice, and a lot of the people that I used to oppose took notice, and I ended up talking to some of the lawyers that ended up doing the case against Andrew England that he ended up losing. But Will actually came to me and asked if I knew anybody that would be able to give talks to his people. Well, so happens I was talking to Christian Picciolini, so I we kept it quiet at first. I mean, I didn't really care if my name got out, but we still kind of kept it quiet that I hooked them up. And Christian went to Montana for a tour, a speaking tour, and I even went to the one in Helena, and it was pretty interesting. And I met a lot of the people from the Montana Human Rights Network and stuff like that, and that was kind of the beginning of my path towards what I'm doing now.
All right, excellent. So a quick request, which is you may need to up the light in there just a little bit because your camera is. Oh, there you go. We can see your face again. Thank you. Will,
I'll be right back.
All right, perfect. So by Will, I believe he means Will Randall of the Montana Human Rights Network. We're going to come back to Will in just a minute. So we do have a couple more questions. We're sort of now hopefully have developed kind of an understanding of how he got in, what was happening inside, and now we're going to find out a bit more about how he got out. So I assume by Will you mean Will Randall of the Montana Human Rights Network?
Correct. At the time, I think he was Love Lives here in the Flathead, but then he started working for the Montana Human Rights Network. All
right. So you said you got out. You were trying to make amends. We had one question, which I think was an excellent question from Pat, which is by this point, it seems like you have a lot of insider information on conspiracy, on the possibility of crimes. Certainly, a number of threats that have been made on Stormfront. You had mentioned you were talking to lawyers in one case. Did you ever debrief with the police? Did you ever go to the police? Did you think about it? What sort of happened on the legal side in terms of your getting out?
This is one of those questions that there are reasons why I can't answer it.
All right. Okay. Have you gotten a lot of threats after leaving? Were there people who, specifically from Stormfront? Sounds like Stormfront blew up, and then you got doxxed. What was that situation like?
I mean, I received many threats before I ever got out. I was very divisive in the movement, so I tended to generate threats pretty good. Yeah, there's basically been steady stream of threats since I got out. They have waned over time as they kind of figure out that the threats aren't going to scare me any. And I will say I'm not worried at all. Even if somebody makes a threat towards me, I know white nationalists white nationalists tend to be pushovers. So I'm not really kind of worried about any of them actually taking any action towards me.
All right. So now I find Will Randall very fascinating here. So he was the head of the was he the head, or he's at the Montana Human Rights Network? I'm afraid I don't know his position there. I thought he was I don't think he's the head.
He was a member.
He's at. Okay.
Or he was an employee.
The two of you disagreed a great deal and argued quite a bit. And then once you came out, he was, obviously a little sus, but decided sus. I tried to use sus. I tried to be hip and use sus correctly, and I actually inverted it. So my bad. The girls aren't going to be seeing the stream anyway. So not that I have two young kids, believe me when I tell you my opinion as a cool dad could not get any lower anyway. So he must have doubted your intentions when you came out. What happened with him? How did that conversation go, and what was the fruits of that labor?
I could say that the people running the Montana Human Rights Network, most of them definitely didn't trust me. Will he gave me a chance, and he took a leap of faith basically, and I don't say that lightly, because leap of faith is kind of a very kind of almost Christian type thing, and I'm obviously not Christian. He just he had his suspicions. He was kind of like Jonathan Hudson. Jonathan Hudson had also, when he wanted to meet me, he figured that because of the fact that I was being so vocal, that there has to be some truth by it. Because it's not like anybody was prompting me to do it. So they gave me a chance, and it was more than I could ask for.
He said to, again, I think it was the Tampa Bay Times or Tampa Bay Tribune, that in his view, there are people who are irredeemable and can't be pulled out. And you were simply not one of those people, and that he had sort of always suspected that there might be a way to get you out, and that you were not so deep in that you couldn't be brought to reason. But he said there are people who can't. You had a different opinion. What was your view?
Actually, technically, I would say, especially at this point in time, I actually agree. There are, right. Yeah. In fact, I would even argue, especially at this point in time, that the majority of white nationalists aren't going to ever get out, especially as it becomes more and more mainstream and it becomes more cult oriented. It was fairly culty when I was in it. Obviously, I was kind of like not necessarily a cult leader, but a cult recruiter. And so yeah, this, when I had that discussion with Claire, I had just started doing Hands of Air and helping out Christian, and so I had a lot more hope that people could change, and yes, people can change. I like to think I have, but I've kind of gotten a little bit jaded just since I've been kind of doing this sort of work. And, I do realize it took me a while to realize that it's pretty much impossible to really de-radicalize a person. You can always help a person once they're already willing to get out. But you're not going to ever really go in and pull somebody out, because they're just not interested. So yeah, I've gotten a lot more there's a reason why Hands of Air, my organization, doesn't do DRAD really anymore. I do counseling for people that do reach out, but I don't DRAD anymore. So
I was going to ask you about that. So why don't you tell us about your organization? It's Hands of Air, and tell us about it.
So Hands of Air was kind of modeled on Free Radicals Project, which was Christian Picciolini's organization. I would help him out, after it got to the point where we basically became colleagues, and so I basically, he would send people my way. We would talk and stuff like that. But one of the things that I kind of realized is, I came out as LGBT right in the middle of the troll storm, which was part of the some of the backlash that did happen against me was from that. And so, Free Radicals Project was an organization that LGBT people could reach out to, but it obviously wasn't geared towards resources for LGBT people that are trying to exit extremism. And also, Hands of Air in particular, once we founded it, had also a focus on pagans and heathens. But I modeled it after Free Radicals Project, kind of as its own kind of sub organization. And, but I wanted that focus on LGBT people. And now that's not to say that everybody that's reached out to us is LGBT. In fact, the first several weren't. And I've even had some really awesome discussions with tradcasts that have reached out with me, people that obviously didn't like LGBT people very much. There's been several LGBT people have also reached out and stuff like that, and we wanted a safe space for people. It took me a lot to actually kind of learn, just the LGBT community in general. Luckily, me being in college helped because they had these safe zone classes, and you could become a safe zone where people could trust coming to you for advice or stuff like that. I specifically took those classes just so I could actually learn the community, and wean myself off of any remaining. I wasn't the most anti-LGBT white nationalist out there. I've defended LGBT people on Stormfront, but I've also said some homophobic things and stuff like that. So I had to learn how to think differently, and I used those classes as a way to do that. And I put what I learned into what we do with Hands of Air. And so we do have several clients still ongoing. The organization runs on no budget. It's entirely pretty much at this point, just they call me, we talk, we've become like family. We keep in touch, and sometimes a person who reached out moves on. Sometimes I have 3 that I talk to on a fairly regular basis. One, not as much anymore. One that sometimes disappears and then sometimes comes back. And then there's one that I actually spend a lot of time talking to him. In fact, we play video games together. It's a very close-knit kind of group. For something with no budget whatsoever, I like to think I do a lot of good for these formers that are trying to change. They all acknowledge their faults. They all acknowledge the harm they've done. And, some of them are now trying to help their friends get out, so it's really good. The main thing that we require for Hands of Air is that they disengage. And, if they don't change on every little aspect, that's not really much of a bother. if they disengage, if they don't go on any social media and start spouting white nationalist things, if they don't go out and actively harm people, if they don't, if they keep it inside their head and stuff like that, that is itself an improvement. And when you disengage, it makes it easier to actually change in the long run. So that's what we require. We've had a couple that have reached out to me that failed to do that, and so I pretty much said, we can't help you. But I can say that every single person that we have helped, that we have had disengage, in my opinion, they've all changed massively. So, yeah, that's Hands of Error in a nutshell. It's a sort of exit counseling kind of organization that we do our best to just support. We're trying to take a more social work kind of aspect to this. Eventually, if we can ever get a budget and actually, do things, we would like to meet needs. So if somebody is having issues that helped cause, them to decide to turn to the right, I'm drawing a blank on a kind of example, but if we can meet that need, that we can help them, they're very much less likely to slide. And one thing about formers, every former, and I will include myself on this, is we all have the potential to kind of slide back into our old routines. We all have the potential to sometimes have a thought that that's very similar to our old beliefs. Slippage happens constantly with formers. So if we can minimize that, and one of the ways that keeps me going is the fact that I do this work, so
it almost sounds
that's it in a nutshell.
It almost sounds like, well, I think one of the needs, and I think there's any number of needs we've talked about. I think there's a lot, and I don't want to go into a rabbit hole. And I, as I said before, enjoy rabbit holes. It's the degree in in philosophy. That one's the philosophy. As my wife likes to say, degrees in bullshitting and mind fucking, which is really not that far from the truth. But having said that, it seems to me that, and you had mentioned this, that, you sort of took pride in the fact that you were almost like a lone wolf and a wanderer, and I see a lot of that in white nationalists. That's what it looks like. I'm not an expert, but, and it seems that need seems to be a sense of community, and listening to you over the course of nearly 90 minutes now, one of the things that you talked a lot about was overlooking the faults, no matter how egregious, of people, because you connected with them on some level, seems to be what, and some of that was, I suspect, and you seem to have acknowledged, no doubt, deliberate and fake, where they were manipulating you in much the same way where you said you'd be willing to pump up the ego of someone you actually didn't like, but some of that, I have no doubt, was very, very genuine as well. And George W. Bush was an alcoholic, and he was an alcoholic till the day he died, even though he wasn't drinking. He just replaced the alcohol with Christianity, and it worked for him, but he was a dry drunk. And it sounds like you're still trying to find that community, and maybe you're going to find it there. With any luck. I certainly wish it. Is that fair? I'm throwing a lot of, let me diagnose you. I'm sorry, we did this wrong. We're going to set up a lamp over you. You're going to find a couch. You're going to lay back, and I'm going to start to tell you, how does that sound? That sound like a great way to spend an evening? Anyways, what do you think?
I don't disagree. I even said, we're like fam. With the one I play video games with, I play with video games with him a lot. It's creating, instead of finding community with his former associates, his community is with, at the moment, just me and his wife. But there is a lot of truth to that. That's one of the kind of services. If we can ever grow, right now, there's actual quote employees. I mean, again, we don't make any money, so and we don't. We basically have no budget whatsoever. We spend money instead. There's only 2 of us. We have board members other than us, but we're the only 2 that are actual employees, and I'm the only one that actually does sort of hands-on, discussions. So, yeah, even though we're a community, it's basically they're my community. So.
My understanding is it's a nonprofit. Nonprofits must have board members, but it can just be, they're responsible for signing one document like a year essentially, and they don't necessarily have to do anything, but you can't be a nonprofit without board members. So that's,
they do help us steer. So they do help us decide where our, for example, I am on the board, and we got together and that's when we were thinking, we should take this more social work approach. I mean, one of our board members is a professor of social work. So of course we're going to go in that direction.
For everyone who's interested, the website is linked down below, so you can go check that out. I was a little shocked when I first went there because that was one of the first things. I try to talk to my guests, and I like to, when possible, it's not always possible, but I like to not ask a question that I don't already know the answer to. Every now and then I get surprised. I was like, you disagree? You think, because you had said you had said, oh, anybody's redeemable, and nope. I was like, whoa, okay. Which makes the show much more interesting. So perfect. But, I had, went to that website before I had realized that you were into Odinism, and so I saw it, and I gotta tell you, it looked a little white nationalist to me. So I was like, okay, did I misunderstand who this guy is or what he's doing? Because it has that same kind of symbology, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on that. Are you worried that that's a turn off? Are you worried that that's a turn on? You can say, hey, we're using the same symbols, but we're good people and come, and it eases or it's also, I know it's just your interests. So, but I'm curious. I can't be the first one to have mentioned that.
No, you're not. Odinists, by and large, are not white nationalists. There are obviously white nationalist subsets, but most heathens are just great people. But that being said, both founders of Hands of Air are heathens. So when we were brainstorming, and because originally our focus was both LGBT people and pagans and heathens, that's why we kind of went with the iconography that we did. On top of the fact that white nationalists do tend to be drawn towards that iconography. So if we use that iconography, they might be more interested in seeking out our services. On top of that, Air was the goddess of medicine and healing and stuff like that. So Hands of Air was naturally something that kind of it sort of represents healing from what we were. So there was a lot of reasons we used that type of look, and so you're not the first person that's commented on that. So
you were talking about slippage, and you were talking about that happens to everybody. Is a part of your head still there? And if so, do you think you'll ever really be out? Like fully, completely just out?
No. I do know that there always is, let's say there's always is a potential. There's always a potential that I'm going to have a thought that is not the greatest. I'm just being honest there. Does that mean I'm necessarily going to slip? No, I'm never going back in. I want nothing to do with white nationalists. My goal is to get as many out as I can. Unfortunately, like I said, it's gotten to the point where I really don't think I'm going to be able to get anybody out, and I think most are going to be in. But every single time somebody reaches out, I am ecstatic. It is the best feeling in the world. But the potential is there, and I know many formers that have slipped, and you know, I can't talk about some of them because of confidentiality. But there's been I've had family members of formers that had exited with the help of other organizations, and in one case the father reached out to us for advice because after the kind of mainstreaming of white nationalism, the former basically started hanging out with Nazis again, and the father was trying to figure out a way, how to stop it, because the son would basically say, "But Dad, it's okay now, so I don't have to worry." And unfortunately, that's the type of thing you have to kind of contend with. So if you're prone to slipping, and you start trying to seek that community again, you're gonna slip. I have no intention of ever seeking that community again. None of the people that I work with are that I can see have that potential. Doesn't mean that they can't. It just means that from what I know of them now, I don't believe they will. But I'm always going to maintain every single one of us has the potential to slip.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Scott has given us a lot of time, which I really appreciate it. I do have 3 more questions that I'm going to ask him, but we're wrapping up. And so we're going to ask these 3, and then I think we're going to be done. If you have a question that you feel we missed, let me know, and I can get to that. I also don't want to take up too much more of his time, but I think I really appreciate it. And I think you've been very honest with us, which I appreciate. So, yeah, let's start to wrap this up. We have a Discord. If you want to ask any more questions, I can pass them on to him. You can let me know on the Discord, or just talk to us about anything. We're also obviously covering Donald Trump.
I could always join the Discord.
And if you, I will send you, actually, it's also, you can just do discord.intimeshow.com. So that will get you into the Discord. And I'll also send you a link. So I'm sure if anybody would like to speak with him, then please. Thank you. I often ask, and they're like, what is Discord? So I should have gotten out of the habit of trying to push it on to guests.
We actually, Hansabear actually used to run a Discord. So when we first started, we that's how we did our community. So
well, I'm gonna be in the VC after this. So if you would like to join me in the VC, if you have time, I know we've already run long, but I'll be in the VC afterwards if anybody wants to join. So if you want to join on the VC, I can help make sure you get in. And if anybody wants to ask questions, hopefully we can do that. Otherwise, he'll be in the Discord and you can text him. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. There were a lot of questions, and I really got to the ones that mostly dovetailed with where I was going. That's just one of the perks of running the show. So, and we have, unfortunately,
you could always do an AMA, and I would answer anything.
All right. So, and you're available on Twitter. That should be in the description as well. Definitely, yeah. And I've come up with some other questions, but I think it's just sort of a different rabbit holes upon rabbit holes upon. It's going to be inception in time and on. In time, I don't know, but we're not doing it. So, thank you very much. So the first question is, and this is one of the bigger ones, January 6th, how did that affect you?
I was watching it with my aunt. I was, I was kind of unemployed at the time. I was sick because I've been pretty ill for a little while, so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was watching it with my aunt. I was staying at her house, and at first I was just watching the speech, and we're making fun of Trump, and just I kind of expected something was going to happen, but I did not expect the insurrection to be the way it was. And so it did catch me off guard. And I'm watching it. And my first thought is, I hope everybody in the Capitol is okay. I hope they get everybody out safe. I hope all the politicians, no matter which side they're on, I hope they all get out safe. Unfortunately, some of them were actually egging it on, but I didn't want to see anybody harmed. I've unfortunately again seen far too many people hurt. So it was tough. It was very, very difficult, and brought up a lot of bad memories. It brought up a lot of anger. It made me want to do more to fight. So yeah, that's kind of how it is. And I think you can hear from the tone of my voice kind of how it was.
Did you know any of the people involved to the best of your knowledge, or did you hear of anybody that you knew of involved? Ties were severed by then, but
I would not be surprised. Yes, I did. I did know some of those involved. I was once an oath keeper, so yeah. I've met Stuart before, so I wasn't I wasn't an active oath keeper at all. I was just a member, but I met him at a prep convention here in Kalispell. But other than that, as far as I know, I didn't know anybody there. It's not like it was Unite the Right Charlottesville, where I did know somebody. In fact, Stan, one of my former roommates in the PLE, was at Charlottesville. Yeah, I have no idea if I knew anybody else at the insurrection.
Do you still feel guilt over your time then? And if so, mostly what about? How does that express itself?
Every day. And most of my guilt, I will say most of my guilt is towards the LGBT community, because despite the fact that I was maybe not the worst, occasionally defending, but largely ignoring hate towards the LGBT community. I feel I could have done more to not be that way and defend more and stuff like that. But especially trans people. Again, I wasn't outwardly hateful of trans people back then, but I did think it was dumb, and I'm saying this is somebody with a lot of trans friends and family now, and I am non-binary. But I thought it was weird and dumb, and I didn't understand it. So I've definitely said transphobic things in the past, and it's very difficult when you're a member of community to realize how much hate you helped push towards that community. People of color, it's the same thing. People of color, I hold a lot of regret over pushing, hatred towards people of color. My focus was always on owning the libs in general. So there was a lot of common ground that I had with a lot of just quote unquote normal Republicans. But I was a white nationalist, and so I regret the things that I pushed that were actually hateful. And I'm always working to try to fix fix myself, and I like to tell people, I am not redeemed. I am not redeemed. I am a work in progress, and I will always be a work in progress. Every single person I interact with is helping me, basically. So.
And my last question comes in two parts, because all of my questions, I always do it, but it's more dramatic if I separate the parts. You could say it's three questions, but again, I got the degree in philosophy, and I'm saying it's one question in two parts, and I'm running the show, so I get to do that. What do you most miss about having been in these groups?
Not really anything. I miss some of the individuals I miss as people, because I got to know some of these people. They're good and they're bad. And some of them were pleasant at times. Some of them had their moments. In general, the ones that really annoyed the crap out of me, the ones that thought about racism and stuff like that, just nonstop, day after day. But there are a lot of white nationalists out there, or used to be a lot of white nationalists out there, that they had a little bit of depth to them and actually had hobbies and things that they like to do and stuff like that. And some of those type of people, yeah, I do miss some of them, and I would love to see any of them that haven't left, and I know a lot of them have. Any of them that haven't left, I would love to see them get out. There is a sort of kind of there was a sort of romantic kind of feeling. I mean, not romantic as in romance, but romantic as in kind of, like riding off into the sunset type of romance to the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, and the we understand the world at a different level than everybody else, and the camaraderie that comes with that, and the appeal to ego that comes with that. It is romantic, I think, is a spectacular word for it. So I get that. What do you most regret about that time that makes you most glad for being out?
Like I mentioned, the LGBT community is fantastic. I wish I had known that sooner. Technically I did. Before I went into white nationalism, I was a little bit more open about being LGBT early on. I still was closeted, but people close to me kind of knew that I had LGBT tendencies. So some of my closest friends early on were, LGBT. One of my best friends of all time, bisexual woman. And she even was a roommate early on when I entered the movement. She didn't agree with anything at all and stuff like that. She kind of just took me as me regardless of those beliefs. So she stayed friends with me, and she would get into debates with me, and she even who ended up admin on another Antifa founded forum called Open Debate that was an offshoot of Moot Stormfront. And I was actually an admin for a while in there, because for a while they kind of had a thing where there was one Antifa admin, one white nationalist Antifa, and then a neutral Antifa, or neutral admin. And I took the white nationalist admin spot, and Antifa had a admin spot, and then my friend took the neutral, quote unquote neutral spot, although functionally she pretty much opposed us, but the white nationalist side, but because of the fact that she was my roommate, they kind of put her in the neutral spot on there. Very much the LGBT community is fantastic. I really wish I had understood that through my time in the movement.
All right. Well, could you let us know the link or the website? The link is actually in the description, but I'd also like to just have you say it so that everyone can hear it who's not. And this was the shocker to me, was the number of people who never see. We got really nice graphics. We got animated. I can like close my window here. I can, control it. I could do all these really nice things. And it turns out 50% of our audience doesn't see any of it. They're listening to it on their phone and their earbuds, and they're like, so. Lesson learned. Could you just let us know where people could find you, and then also let us know like any final thoughts or anything you wanted to say before we head out? I want to make sure you get a minute to just anything you want to say about the discussion, the show, Purple Unicorns, whatever.
𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐼nc can be found at www.𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐼nc.org. For now, I've got to pay the domain, so hopefully it doesn't go down before I do that. Again, we don't have a budget, so we don't have any sort of money coming in. So it's pretty much just all paid whenever we can.
I feel you.
We're basically a hobbled together organization. And as soon as I get my first paycheck here at my new job, I will. I'll try to make sure that's up and running. And I just want to say to anybody that's listening that I've ever harmed, or if anybody, is offended by anything that I was, well, which is pretty much everybody, but, I hope at least that I'm not the best speaker in the world. So I'm not a public speaker. And, while I will answer any question, I may not always answer in the best way. And so I hope I didn't offend anybody. And, I hope that my path is better. And I hope that people see that. And if not, feel free to critique me, send me a DM on Twitter. Anybody can do it. I will answer any DMs, and I will take any critiques and criticisms, and if you want to yell at me, that's okay too. So.
Well, listen, I may take you up on that. No criticisms per se of anything that we've ever discussed, but somebody cut me off in traffic earlier. Gotta yell at somebody, and I'm not turning down an open invitation like that. But all right. So that should be, if that's not in the description yet, I will put that in. I think your Twitter's in the description. It may not be. We'll make sure that gets out. I had said earlier we're going to VC. I actually will not be able to VC. So I think we should hold on the VC, but we can organize that later if people are interested. Contact, and I'll make sure you do get onto our Discord, because I want people to be able to reach you there. I do want to reiterate what I said earlier, which was you had said we can ask you anything. And that's not something we get from a lot of guests. And considering, by the way, you didn't know us from Adam, so I reached out to you for the second time in 2 years and said, would you come on? And you said yes, and basically put no restrictions on it, which we sincerely appreciate. And I personally would like to wish you continued success on your journey. It sounds like you've got some struggle left, but it sounds like you know that, and you're moving in that direction, and you're aware that it's a process, and you're doing it. So kudos to you for all of that. It's not easy. It's not easy to come on here and talk about it, especially with someone you've never met before. So I sincerely appreciate your trust in doing that, and thank you very much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. I mean, I've only been out of the movement for basically 6 years. So, I mean, that's not a lot of time.
It's pretty funny because you said 6 years and I nodded. Yes, it's been 6 years. I was like, oh, fuck. Because I've got the bio. I've got the cheat sheets. I was like, okay, so you met, hold on. That's when you met April, I can't even, GAET. I don't know, but that's when, okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the mods. This has been take some of the graphics budget and put it towards the audio. We're going to have to do something about some mods in the side chat. Thank you all for joining us. And we will tomorrow. I'm going to be working on the audio because some people just never give me a friggin' break. And Thursday, we will probably be doing downtime with Commander McMillan. We're still scheduling stuff. We're obviously following Trump. That's going to be a big thing. We're going to have Starsky on Saturday. No, it's not Saturday. Jesus, Sunday. It's only been Sunday for like 6 months now, or Friday. Wow. I may be more tired than I thought. We will have him on Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, which is the same date and time it's been for friggin' 6 months. We're going to have Operator Starsky on. We also are going to be having a charity stream donating to refugees using the UN Refugee Fund, specifically for Ukraine. That will be on the 22nd. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. In fact, actually, here's what I can do. Hold on a sec. What I'm going to do, this is what the shield is for, so I can turn around and show everybody my butt. I know there's a nasty rumor. So everyone says that this is a $400 suit, and it's not. It's only $200, but that's because, well, I only had to pay for half the suit, and I can't actually get up on stream. But at any rate, oh, come on, that was funny. So, Godless Mom made us this. She crocheted this herself. It is a Ukrainian flag. I finally got it. We're also going to get a thank you letter from Operator Starsky, and I will write a thank you letter to whoever has the highest donation. That will be on April 22nd. We'll talk more about that. That's already in our Discord, too. Hope to see you guys in our Discord. Thank you, sir, once again, for coming on, and thank you all, and we will see you on Thursday and or Friday, barring any breaking news. Have a good evening, all of you. Thank you again.